Thank you, Andreas, that you're here again with us on the floor. A naozaj poďte pokojne bližšie k nám, come closer to us. We appreciate it, and we would like to have you as a part of our fish bowl. I do hope these two fish are in a sustainable situation. Today, I'm not so sure, but we do hope so. There is maybe one more point I would like to express concerning Andreas Friedwagner. He's a transportation planner, he's a geographer, we heard his presentation in the morning, but if you have time when you come home tonight, watch his movie on YouTube about his sustainable journey alongside the river Danube and on the Danube. It's a movie, it's about, I think, 40 minutes, I think. It's really it's a lot of fun as well, and it's a very nice introduction into his work as well. And maybe we could start with this, because you have this very personal experience, Andreas, traveling alongside the Danube, and you made a movie about it. And what was like a fundamental thing you learned about the river after this trip?
Actually, the thing I learned is something that was discussed at the end of the last discussion, that actually the Danube is much bigger than we are. The Danube is much bigger than any destination, and the Danube is bringing us to great places. Some of them are well known, most of them are hidden and not that well known, and these are the very surprising places. And with that, the Danube is surprising us when we are traveling at the Danube. And I can also tell we did this trip completely sustainable, besides some boat trips that were to be questioned. But mostly it was buses, trains, bicycle, walking. And also this choosing this means of transport means that you are open to be surprised, to let you surprise yourself, because this is not the traditional way many people are traveling. This is not the way that we feel maybe confident, because we have to engage with our surrounding. But that's what it makes very interesting, exciting, and you will never forget the things that you experience traveling along the river sustainably.
Andreas, we in Slovakia, we tend to look at Austria as some sort of a example of a more environmental friendly country, and but this is something which is also relatively new for Austrian society. When you look 40 years ago, this was not always the case. We are here very close to Hainburg, where actually sort of a beginning of an Austrian environmental movement started, because there was a plan in the 80s to build a nuclear power plant there. And in a way, some people say this was like the very beginning. Can you really shortly explain what was going on at that time, and how it changed the view of so many Austrians?
Actually, it's two events. The nuclear power plant was a bit upstream.
Upstream, yeah.
It's Zwentendorf. So we have it there. It's you could start, maybe not now, but it was ready to be started, but never went into operation. That maybe is one thing, and the second is this hydropower plant. This was Hainburg, that was not built because of the first environmental movement, and it's also this kind of foundation myth behind the Green Party in Austria, but it's environmentally friendly thinking, and with that, sustainable mobility doesn't have that long a tradition in Austria. I say that, and I recognize that it's not completely true, because there were times where we didn't have the possibility to choose. In the 70s, in the 80s, a lot of transport was public. Publicly organized, because the motorization rate, so the number of people having a private car was less, and with more and more cars on the streets, the travel behavior changed, but still now I think it's a development in the last 20-25 years where tourism experts are rethinking the way people are visiting the different destinations in Austria. We still have a very let's say, a low model share of public transport of the people arriving to Austria. It's something around 12 to 13% among the Germans coming to visit the country. A very large part is the private car. So although we are now dealing with this topic for 20-25 years, there's still a very long way to go.
Mm-hmm. You already mentioned the word myth.
Yeah.
Danube is definitely a big European myth as well, and especially it's Austrian myth. You know, Donau Metropole, Donau Monarchie, the Danube monarchy, the Danube metropolis. It's also a part of the German language. It's became part of Austrian identity, definitely, and there are many cultural studies on this. How somehow this cultural huge landscape spreading all over from Trieste all the way to over Novi Sad to Galician. There is some sort of connection which is there thanks to the river. But we don't have time to really spread so much details about the big Danube myth. But let's have a look maybe at some best practice examples from Austria. And I would maybe start in one of my favorite smaller cities on the Danube. That's Linz. Linz in Upper Austria. Linz was in the cultural capital of Europe, and one of the key changes were closely connected to the Danube. Maybe you could tell us a bit like how you see the city before this, and how you view Linz as a sustainable touristic place connected closely to the river.
Well, I have a long history with Linz because I'm born in Upper Austria, so it was my regional capital. So I was going there when I was able to travel alone for nightclubs and all the other stuff that you're doing when you're younger. Linz changed a lot. Linz, in many discussions I have with friends or people all over Europe, is known as an industrial city. Also, there are quite dark years during Second World War. Where Linz haven't played the best role, but until the, I would say, 90s, Linz was trying to find its identity, and the cultural capital in 2009, if I remember right, made them really think what is Linz, and it's very much about industry, but it was also very much about the Danube. It was quite clear that beside industry, the Danube is one of the unique points that Linz can offer. And they, I think, quite successfully set steps to open the Danube for their people and for visitors. So they built this big museum.
Lantos
Museum. There were plans there were a lot of opportunities to build it within the city, but they have chosen a spot right at the Danube. Plus, it's constructed, I don't know if you know it, like an arc. So you are walking through the building to the Danube. So it's very open. So it's not a block that is, again, providing a barrier or is a barrier for people to approach the river, but it was open and it's light, and it's really targeting at the Danube and the city. So it's a kind of an arch that is combining the city with the river. And there were a lot of other things. During our discussion today in the Yellow Group, we had this issue of the old harbor. Linz also has this old harbor, and I think the last 10 years they spent a lot of effort to think what to do with it. And now we have this mural harbor with this great graffiti, more or less capitalizing on what was already there. And the structures that were there are the same structures that we find here. So they, instead of just demolishing everything, were just thinking how to combine it, how to keep this kind of heritage and to add another dimension to it. And this is, I think, bringing a lot of people to Linz, making Linz making Linz different. And this is something that we need to work or think about. when talking about a destination at the Danube. So what is unique for the destination? What is it standing for?
I would maybe stay. There's one more question in Linz, because I really like this city, and I usually come for more than just one day. I try to sleep over and see more, and always discover something else. And also, we could also mention like Ars Electronica as a building which is also on the other side of the Danube, dealing with new media, new technologies, innovation, which also became some of the synonym of Austrian economy in many ways. We have a Bruckner concert hall. Compared to Bratislava, Bratislava actually also has a philharmonics almost directly on the river Danube, but it's not so very much communicated as being it. So when you look at this city, what I find so attractive about Danube and Linz is that the connection is also the cultural one. Like culture became sort of, say, the second pillar of Linz identity. It's not just the old industrial center of Upper Austria, but it became a truly cultural capital which became sustainable. Like it's still very attractive for artists, for festivals, and so could maybe culture be one of the answers to in searching for a new direction, maybe also for Bratislava?
Definitely, culture is actually bringing people together. Culture is new, innovative, so it makes you think, opens your mind, and I think it's definitely something that destinations should think of when positioning themselves. And Linz, I mentioned that with the Mural Harbour, they had these industrial structures that they are now using for cultural events. Yeah. Also, the tobacco factory is one of these places that is amazing. Amazing space for cultural events. And bringing these two things together is one of the success factors of Linz, I would assume. Yeah.
If you would maybe move to the other direction, would you mention some best practice examples from maybe Balkan countries, which we talked before about Novi Sad, maybe as an what would you like to which place do you like most in like example of good connection between the city and the Danube southwards?
It's not so easy, I have to say. I was, given the circumstances, quite surprised by Vukovar, a city which with a very, very tough history, especially recent history.
Balkan Wars,
and it was almost completely destroyed, the inner part. But they are actually doing a quite good job to open the city to the river. They have this film festival there. They have this great solar boat running on the river Danube. Is also used for screenings during the film festival. It's the interesting thing about Vukovar was actually that that I was not expecting that. Having heard all the history and all these bad stories about that, and then being there and meeting a lot of people that are very open-minded and that are so curious to be part of a new movement of also tourism along the Danube. That was very surprising for me. But I think in our discussion you mentioned Novi Sad, which I don't know that well, but maybe this could be you describing why Novi Sad is maybe some place like that.
On the Danube? Well, I definitely love Danube Delta. I think there is a lot of potential which is almost unknown here. It's like it's like an Africa in Europe. It's a very, very different natural landscape, and it's a completely different fauna and flora, and it's worth discovering, and I think they are really trying to make it more accessible, and they are also sustainable. They're looking for ways to attract it, make it more attractive even for people from Central Europe. It's very far away, but I do believe that more people from here will travel all the way down to Delta because I think it helped me to understand what really how huge Europe is and what potential it has, and Delta as being a place where in the Roman times people were, so to say, forced to leave as a sort of it was like an vyhnanstvo in English, like expelled people who were you had to go all that way far to it was like being in a prison, and also to understand the history. I think Delta is great, even to understand Russian history, because you have all this with some of this staroverci. You have like you understand the religious conflicts of old Russia. This is maybe my most favorite place. But my biggest fascination in the Danube is the huso, the sturgeon, the huge sturgeon fish, which unfortunately died out, and I so to say gave it a voice in a story and also in a children's book, because we used to have this giant 1,000 kilograms or 8 meters long swimming here around once or twice a year, and it must have been some sort of a show when sturgeon of this size was swimming all the way up to Regensburg over Vienna, and was somehow unfortunately hunted for caviar and other parts, and so these are my two big obsessions dealing with Danube.
Great. I was not talking about ecological areas. There is so many of them. When I've been asked immediately after this trip that took us 22 days along the river, what was the greatest surprise, the nicest place I've been to, this was Sigitkus, so very close to Bratislava, because it's like a jungle. You're kind of feeling in the middle of the jungle, and you are there with a boat. If you have the luck to have a great guide, as we did with Sultan, you can really feel what is going on there. And there are so many enthusiastic people also we met there. Events on rivers, we had one guy from Mozon, Magyarova, and he's organizing this Voluta festival. Dragon boats rowing on the river Leita. There are so many things that you can do, and it was so amazing to see that. There's so much idealism, and there's so much we can capitalize on when it also comes to tourism. But Michael, my question before was Novi Sad, like a city at the Danube. You mentioned that this is one of the places that you really like, and I only have been changing there. I was changing trains in Novi Sad. This is my only experience with Novi Sad, so I cannot really go into details. But it's another capital of culture.
Yes, and I do believe that there are so many similarities to Bratislava, starting with the size and starting with the importance it had in this Central European space and this very rich history, and the fortress there, and also the lingual minorities. So it's very similar as here, like a variety on a very small space. So I do believe that they understood that they, especially with festival, with theater, music, literature, they can be more attractive for visitors, and I think after the first wave, so to say, with cheap flights and EasyJets and Ryanairs, they somehow try to find more sustainable ways of tourism to attract people, not just coming for a wild weekend, but somehow to be there and spend some money and understand the culture better. And I think Novi Sad has used a lot of potential and has this very good connection to the river, and so this is something Bratislava could learn from as well. So I do believe it's a nice best practice example. And what about Germany? I know you cooperated with Ulm as well, with your company. You gave them some advices about transportation, about sustainability. Could Ulm be, in your eyes, one of the best practices in the German Danube?
It could, when it's taken the right steps. The preconditions are very good. So it's a very attractive riverbank. So there is already a lot of green areas. It's open for pedestrians, for cyclists. the thing, it's connected to the main railway network in Germany and with that internationally, so it's quite easy to get there. They have an obstacle, which is actually a benefit when it comes to sustainable traveling. They are not. They don't have an airport, so they have to go to Stuttgart in order to take a plane. But it's still, as many German cities, it's a car city. So you see a lot of cars in the city, and they have to manage to kind of reduce the number of cars in their cities in order to be more attractive. Even in the very heart, they have started to pedestrianize certain areas, which makes it so attractive to be there. And this is, I think, also something that Bratislava should even think more about, pedestrianizing areas and creating great public spaces where people can just spend time, not forced to consume something, but just to be there, to enjoy the river, the city. This is, I think, one of the best things a city can do in order to be more attractive for the citizens and for the tourists. And this is something that we partly, and hopefully in the future more, can learn from Ulm.
Mm-hmm. Do think about your questions and comments. We are very much welcoming it, of course, but I still have some questions and maybe some comments. And is there anybody who would like to join us? Maybe here we have two more. Pani Vice Mayor is also here, so maybe she could join us if she has some time and feels like it. I don't want to force you, but you are very welcome to join us in this fishbowl setting. And well, one of the things I was surprised was not mentioned that much today is the climate crisis, because the rivers, especially on the rivers, you can see how climate is changing. And we were mentioning, of course, the quality of water is getting better on Danube, but the Danube is getting warmer, and that's a huge problem for the river. So, how do you view from this side? Because this is something that is gonna influence life on the river and in our cities, Vienna and Bratislava. I think we should remember it more than we did today.
Yeah. I agree, but I have to confess I'm not a water expert, so I don't know too much about that. Mm-hmm. What I would like to stress regarding the quality of water is the role of cruise ships. Mm-hmm. We are, let's call it, almost worshipping cruise ship companies. You've been working for one of them, I think, to stop at the city to as often as possible and to bring a lot of day tourists. We've heard this impressive number of 7 million day tourists in Bratislava. I was very surprised. But these cruise ship liners, they are actually bringing quite some troubles with the waste, with emissions, and
overconsumption on board. They are not really using the city in a way of, like, they're not spending money there. They're just using the city as some sort of background attraction. And I'm having a hard time to see that cities are kind of trying to convince and spending loads of money to convince these cruise ship liner companies to have a stop and to stay. And on the other hand, investments in cycling infrastructure would be much less. It would be beneficial for the local people too. They are staying longer. They are spending more money. They are more sustainable aware. They have an awareness about sustainability, a stronger one. Sometimes I'm really wondering why it is like that. Mm-hmm. And there's one more thing that I would like to add maybe to our discussion today on the conference, and that's, we were talking about sustainability, especially dealing with the nature, with the impacts on the natural resources. But there is another, I think this at least the same important issue, and that's the social issue, because tourism also means a lot of underpaid jobs, a lot of underdogs working in the tourism industry, including cruise ships, including the hotels. You know, it is the lowest level of income we have in our city. And so, like, the local population is part of the sustainability. And how do you think the Vienna in this case is a good example that, like, is Viennese tourism sustainable from your point of view? When you look, because you have all these millions of people coming, and you have and it's all very often said, well, this is a major part of our economy. It's like Austria is so rich and prosperous thanks to the tourists as well. How you look at it from this social issue, if you feel competent?
That's not an easy question. In Vienna, tourism has a very long tradition. It has been evolving over decades. So it was possible to build up structures that might be a bit more sustainable. But on the other hand, you know, a lot of people also to Vienna are coming by plane. So the question of mobility is not much better than we see it here in Bratislava, although we are very much, I would say we are better linked with the international railway network, as we've seen before, than Bratislava is. So we have better preconditions, but still there is a big issue with the planes. About this social dimension of sustainability, cruise ships have the same people on board, so we have the same situation, I would say, in Vienna than you have it here in Bratislava. And also hotel business is not that much different, I would say. So what we recognized when traveling along Danube, because we also had a focus on that, is that there are more and more like green hosts. So hotels, accommodation providers that are really thinking sustainably in all these dimensions. So we have certified hotels, and the certification includes social indicators. So the payment issue is there, also the number of hours that are worked, so free time issues. So there are a lot of dimensions included when you want to become a green host. And this is a dimension of sustainable tourism that we haven't covered today, but I think it's very important because there are quite some people who are trying to travel from one of those green hosts to the other. So when traveling sustainably, then they also want to stay in one of those hotels that they can be actually quite sure that the responsible persons are taking a lot of things into consideration when it comes to their employees, their waste management, but also mobility issues.
What a nice way to travel. I would love to immediately start a tour like this. Nech sa páči, pani viceprimátorka, chcete sa k nám pridať? A pani Kratochvílová, dobrý deň. A takisto budeme veľmi radi, keď nám položíte svoje otázky. We are very much looking forward to your questions and your comments. Lady Vice Mayor is here. She joined us a bit later.
Thank you very
Andreas
much for joining.
Friedwagner. Dobrý deň. Vítajte, dobrý deň. Poprosíme vás možno o krátky komentár k našej téme, ktorou je ako Dunaj v takom širšom zmysle. We try to summarize some sorts of discussions we had on Danube as sustainability on the river Danube, and what Danube. So maybe you could tell us just simply what personally Danube in Bratislava meant for you. Maybe we could start with this.
V prvom rade ma teda napadá to, čo riešime v ostatné 3 roky, čo sa týka Dunaja. A to je jeho prístup k Dunaju v rámci územia Bratislavy. Samozrejme, do určitej miery aj doprava, do určitej miery aj to, teda ten turizmus, ale v každom prípade to, čo vnímame, že by mesto Bratislava v súvislosti s Dunajom malo mať akoby v lepšom stave, je aj samotný prístav, hej, že využívanie vody a z hľadiska teda prístupu, ak sa teda niekto rozhodne cestovať alebo teda prísť do Bratislavy loďou, A to je vlastne akoby veľký, by som povedala, že nie veľký, ale určitý handicap, lebo ten prístav, jeho vybavenie a jeho prístup aj z tej suchej strany, aj teda z vody, nie je ani zďaleka moderný. Hej. To, čo je ale dôležité v tejto súvislosti povedať, že je to kompetencia v prvom rade štátu a mesto Bratislava začalo komunikovať na túto tému aj s ministerstvom dopravy. Dokonca teda bola vytvorená pracovná skupina, ktorá zatiaľ akože sa iba rozbieha na túto tému. Ale tak, ako to bolo povedané, akože je to veľmi akože významná téma Bratislavy, ktorá žiaľ nedostala doteraz dostatok pozornosti.
Ako vy sama vnímate vlastne ten potenciál Bratislavy z hľadiska toho, vy sa venujete teda mobilite v meste, to je vaša hlavná agenda. Bratislava, už tu zaznelo možno vám to aj tak spomeniem, že veľká túžba obnoviť propeler, to bola taká ako jedna veľká téma, rovnako obnovovať prístup vôbec k rieke, že máme tu nejaký 28-kilometrový úsek, ale vlastne iba na 3 miestach vieme k tomu Dunaju reálne prísť a vložiť ruku alebo nohu do vody. Sú tam nejaké konkrétne plány mesta, ako tieto veci posunúť v nejakom dohľadnom čase dopredu?
Tomu som povedala, že áno, že mesto Bratislava sa tejto téme venuje. Neviem teda, nakoľko tu bol priestor, či už náhodou nezaznela téma, ale tá veľká téma je Bratislavský Dunajský park. Možno už teda tu bola k tomu aj prezentácia, ktorá rieši vlastne všetky tieto témy, ktoré tu aj boli pomenované, alebo ktoré boli vo vašej otázke. Je to ale obrovský projekt, na ktorom musí participovať samozrejme štát, príslušné mestské časti. A tak ako som už povedala, tie kompetencie o rozhodovaní, čo bude s Dunajskými brehmi, patria do značnej miery štátu. Čiže vlastne by sme odkázaní v dobrom slova zmysle na spoluprácu, ale v prvom rade treba akoby touto myšlienkou nadchnúť aj tieto štátne inštitúcie a začať na tom pracovať. To, čo je možno pozitívne, je to, že mnohí developeri, ktorí sú v tomto území okolo Dunaja, tak vlastne takto uvažujú, hej, že vlastne oni sú možno v tomto momente tí kľúčoví, alebo tí, ktorí takto uvažujú, ale samozrejme by to malo byť aj zo strany štátu a zo strany mesta.
I would just comment on this cooperation issue because it seems to be a very, very tricky thing in Bratislava to bring together the right people. And we've been talking about leading such a cooperation. I would not rather look for a leader, but for a coordinator. There are too many leaders in the world, so coordinating is great. And maybe I come back to this example of Ulm. Because Ulm is a city that is departed by the river, but not only that. The northern part is Baden-Württemberg, and the southern part is Bavaria. So it's 2 regions, which you can also say are brought together by the Danube. And it's very complicated because these institutions are different, completely different. And there is one other tricky thing. Ulm is a Stadtkreis, so a city district, and there are other regional districts, and this is also different. So what they did over years, they were trying to figure out who are the relevant persons, and they founded now an organization that is called Zwei Landstrom, so 2 region river or stream, where they are bringing together 40 relevant stakeholders, and they are meeting regularly, discussing all the relevant issues. They have a kind of a plan that they are in principle following, but they're also coming up with new ideas. They are discussing those, and it's not just the tourism stakeholders. It also includes stakeholders from the mobility sector, from the environment sector, and this is a kind of institutionalized discussion board that is not only discussing, because it's not everything, but it's also paving the way for implementation then. And the question would be, are there initiatives ongoing in Bratislava to kind of create something like that? Do you have experience with that?
No, to je to, čo som povedala na začiatku. Vlastne tú iniciatívu vyvinulo Mesto zhruba pred 2 rokmi. Sme po nejakej podobnej konferencii oslovili, možno je to rok a pol, ministerstvo dopravy a skutočne na úrovni ministerstva dopravy bola zriadená pracovná skupina, zjednodušenie, že Dunaj. Ale to, prečo my sme sa domáhali akejsi pozornosti v tomto a spolupráce zo strany štátu, je napríklad to, že tuto hlavne na tomto Petržalskom brehu boli umiestnené alebo sú umiestnené plávajúce zariadenia, čo sú v podstate reštaurácie, o ktorých mesto v podstate nemalo vôbec rozhodovať. A nadlho to ovplyvňuje vlastne to, že akú podobu bude mať tento breh, že sú to plávajúce zariadenia, ktoré sú teda v prvom rade reštaurácie, majú ale prístup cez naše pozemky, tuto konkrétne cez pamiatkovo chránený sad Janka Krála. Ten samotný, akoby to umiestnenie ich si vyžaduje teda určité povolenia, prívod alebo teda inžinierské siete a tak ďalej, ale súčasne tvorí bariéru. Tie sú tak nahusto, je to odtiaľ to veľmi dobre vidieť, sú tak nahusto umiestnené, že nielen zo strany mesta, ale zo strany aj rôznych vodných klubov boli znesené výhrady voči tomu, že aj z hľadiska bezpečnosti, že keby sa niečo stalo, že vlastne sa nedostanú k brehu. A to bola vec doteraz, o ktorej mesto vôbec nemalo šancu rozhodovať. Takže toto je, vlastne to bol taký prvý podnet, na základe ktorého sme začali spolupracovať, ale tá spolupráca ani zďaleka nie je dokonalá. Je to nejaký začiatok a nejaký koordinátor medzi týmito inštitúciami a mestom a teda aj mestskými časťami zatiaľ nie je.
A nie je to taký nejaký veľmi typický bratislavský problém, že zrazu sa dozvieme, že existujú nejaké takéto zvláštne objekty a vlastne, že kto to povolil a že v podstate je to celé také nejaké sporné a vlastne mesto s tým nevie nič urobiť?
No, je to tak, nie sú možno zvláštne, lebo však vyskytujú sa všelikde, ale to, že mesto nemalo šancu sa k tomu vyjadriť, ale aj tí ďalší aktéri, ktorí majú spoločné niečo s vodou v Bratislave s Dunajom, tak to naozaj asi nie je obvyklé. A to je vlastne to prvé, čo chceme, na čom chceme spolupracovať. Medzi časom sa nám celkom rozbehla spolupráca s verejnými prístavmi, že tá komunikácia začína byť iná, ale stále to ešte nie je spolupráca na konkrétnych opatreniach alebo konkrétnych projektoch.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Nech sa páči, má niekto teraz z vás už nejakú otázku, buď na Andreasa alebo na pani Kratochvílovú? Sme tu, ešte máme posledných nejakých 10-15 minút, potom už budeme musieť končiť, takže využite možno čas a spýtajte sa. Pani Kratochvílová, vy keby ste si mali, ešte kým sa teda niekto odváži, tak áno, prosím, nech sa páči, tu už máme otázku.
No, ja by som práve chcel pochváliť pani viceprimátorku Kratochvílovú, áno, ja som Vlado Mišík, a za to, že konečne v rámci mesta mesto si osvojilo tento problém, o ktorom sme už hovorili roky, o nebezpečenstve plávajúcich zariadení z hľadiska bezpečnosti na Dunaji a podniká aktívne kroky. Mesto napriek tomu, že má výtlak oveľa väčší ako naše kajaky, keď sme upozorňovali na tento problém, tak tiež narazilo už na existujúce bariéry, ale teda vnímame veľmi pozitívne, že v priebehu toho posledného štvoročného obdobia naozaj sa mesto pochopilo túto tému, sa aj zhostilo a snaží sa to ovplyvniť. Takže ja chcem vysloviť pochvalu v tomto smere.
Ale nechceli by sme ovplyvňovať, ale chceli by sme spolupracovať. Hej, to je ten vyšší stupeň, ktorý by sme chceli dosiahnuť.
Takže kajakári sú spokojnejší ako v minulosti, to je dobré znamenie. A máme ešte nejaké ďalšie postrehy alebo otázky? Áno, nech sa páči.
Možno.
A druhý Mišík.
Ja mám podnet do diskusie nadviazať na to, čo ste už povedali, že možno by sme dnes sa viac mali venovať aj téme klimatickej zmeny a úplne fundamentálnou záležitosťou celej našej témy dnešnej je obnova riečného ekosystému. Čiže keď riečný ekosystém bude správne fungovať, tak bude odolnejší voči klimatickej zmene, bude nám poskytovať priestor, ktorý nám umožní sa lepšie s ňou vysporiadať. A proste je to základ všetkého, alebo úplne neoddeliteľná časť všetkých iniciatív.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne, to zvlášť oceňujem, keďže si dobre pamätám na výrok istého developera, že tam na tej druhej strane tam nie je nič, iba príroda, takže to treba zastavať. Tak to mi prišlo také veľmi príznačné pre vnímanie prírody našimi developermi. Dobre, tak ak niekto by ešte chcel túto tému možno rozviesť, alebo možno Andreas, keby chcel na to zareagovať, práve na tento moment, že vlastne vytvoriť akoby trvalo udržateľný ekosystém je potom prospešné aj pre mesto, aj pre všetkých faktorov, ktorí s Dunajom a pri Dunaji žijú.
I think if we are talking about capitalizing on the river has to be in a good condition. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to talk about that. And I think the river brought us in many cities over in the position that they are at the very moment. So nothing against the river, I would say. Things have changed quite positively actually for rivers. So the water quality has been increasing. I remember people coming from other rivers like also the Rhine, and I told them, now we're going to swim in the Danube. And they were looking at me like, are you crazy? You want to kill yourself? But it's great. Mm-hmm. You can swim in the Danube, and
I do swim.
Yeah. And it's something that we did in all the destinations that we visited. We tried to find out where we can jump into the river, so to kind of feel the river. We had quite a hard time in Bratislava, I have to say. We were jumping in that Auspik, the restaurant there, yeah, Auspitz, because we met a great guy. A Romanian guy who was swimming the whole Danube at that time in 2017. He was starting in Germany and was swimming until the Danube Delta without any neoprene for the first time. But maybe he was able to do that because the water is getting warmer. So we're coming back to this point of yours. That we have to really be careful about what is happening with our rivers. And I would like to come back to the sturgeon issue, because I was visiting friends in a mountain village, let's call it like that, and they have a kind of a farm for fishes, and they're also actually raising sturgeons.
But in Vienna, there is a small, I don't know if you know, there is a small biological farm with professionals, environmentalists and biologists who are really trying hard to get sturgeon back to the Danube. It's going to be the smaller sturgeon, of course. The giant is not there anymore. He cannot get from the sea, from the Black Sea, due to the huge dams in Romania. Iron Gate stopped sturgeon on its way. But on Donauinsel there is this small laboratory. I don't know if you know it, but it's quite a legend in the biological society, and I'm planning to visit them in this springtime.
Honestly, I haven't been there, but I read about it. Although I'm living in Vienna, I didn't make it.
I'm not sure if it's really accessible, but it would be a beautiful sign to have, because in a way sturgeon is for me a symbol of Danube. But maybe because we are slowly getting to the end, I would. As maybe I mentioned your movie, you have you can see for free in YouTube, and that might be some reasonable time spent on the internet, and there's not so much of it lately. But let's go also to the narratives of Danube, and I would like at least to mention maybe one book which is closely connected to this region where we are right now, and that's Claudio Magri's. The book called Danube, Lebenslauf des Flusses, biography of the river. And interesting for us, living in Bratislava, is that Claudio Magris decided to write this book when he was on the ship from Vienna to Bratislava in Donauauen, and he said this is the most beautiful place. And when I saw the shimmering light on the water, I felt I have to write this biography of the river. And so we are very close to an important, so to say, literary point in the literary history of Europe, where Claudio Magris, this legendary German scholar and writer, he decided he's going to write his big non-fiction book, which became also a sort of a myth of River Danube. And when he somehow connected these two worlds, the Western Europe with the Eastern European cultures, So this is definitely a cult book for a recommendation for further reading on the Danube myth. Do you have such a book recommendation which you somehow change your attitude towards the river?
I could say it's your book, which I read before I got to know you, but that would be a bit too much. It is great to read it anyway. Yeah. So Death on the Danube, I really liked it, especially the end. I went through it. I think it's an anthology of the river. It was published in a small publishing house in Salzburg, and it's actually covering different topics like bridges, like food, things that are important in the Danube region. And they have actually small inputs from different countries. And it gives you actually an impression how big this variety of things that are happening, the things that you can experience is along this river. How big this variety is that this river is bringing also together. And I remember one thing, it's in the border region of Serbia, Hungary, and Croatia, Baranja. And there is a story of friends cooking fish gulasch. And this story, if you read this story, it actually, you want to call your friends, go there and cook this fish soup for days, and being at the river, eating something from the liver, from the also the liver, but from the river, and just enjoying the time together at this beautiful river. This was so amazing for me. This is one of the most impressive things that I've read, not about the Danube, but which
inspired by the Danube.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to eat fish goulash right now when I just listen to this. So I think that's maybe a fundamental experience, that Danube is an experience. It's a sort of lifestyle. It can be a lifestyle as well, and a way of life. And pani Kratochvílová, chceli by ste nám vy možno dať nejaký svoj...
Že kedy som zmenila názor na Dunaj?
Alebo čo vás ovplyvnilo z hľadiska filmu, literatúry, hudby, pohľady na Dunaj?
Poviem o vlastnej skúsenosti, lebo naozaj som vnímala dlhé roky ako dopravák. Možno keď som bola pri stávaní niektorých mostov, ale moje deti ma zobrali v mojej 60-ke k Heimburgu. Prvýkrát som sa kúpala v Dunaji v tomto veku a to zmenilo akoby pohľad na Dunaj. Bolo to strašne príjemné a pochopila som, že to je naozaj živá rieka práve vtedy.
Živá rieka, ja si myslím, že to by mohlo byť aj taký celkom pekný záver. Ja sa pozerám tu na organizátorov z Punktu, či ich uvidím, ale mám pocit, že živá rieka je aj celkom dobrá bodka za dnešnou konferenciou na jednej lodi. We are on the same boat, really, literally and truly. And I think it's a nice metaphor for what we tried to achieve today. Start a dialogue, start a discussion, start a new narrative of the River Danube in our city. So thank you very much, Andreas Friedwagner, ďakujeme pani viceprimátorke, pani Kratochvílovej za to, že sa k nám pridala. Thank you all for joining and listening and asking and commenting and see you next time. Auf Wiedersehen. Láco, chceš ešte ty niečo povedať?
Ďakujeme pekne našim hosťom za bodku, ale aj za vlastne celý deň, ktorý mal byť aj dialogom, ale aj inšpiráciou. Všimli ste si, že tieto veci aj nahrávame, takže aj samotný tento dialog, ale aj tá prvá prezentácia Andreasa bude dostupná aj ďalším. Ja mám pocit, že tak ako keby aj symbolicky tým, že sme dnes na lodi, tak všetci vlastne ešte objavujeme tú rieku, že ešte stále vlastne pre nás mnohých skrýva mnoho záhad a môže byť príležitosťou aj pre nové pohľady, tak verím, že každý z vás si niečo z dneška odnáša. Ja vám ešte ten klikatko tu vidíte?
Teraz to zobrala.
Aha, okay. Dobre, klikni. Takže vlastne už je na čase poďakovať za pozornosť, presmerovať vás ešte potom znovu na platformu CTZN.sk, kde už sú niektoré články na tému Mesto a rieka, ale budú pribúdať ešte ďalšie. Citizen sa venuje jednotlivým témam niekoľko mesiacov a vlastne práve s podporou BTB túto tému ďalej rozpracovávame a možno vás už aj upozorní na ďalšie číslo, ktoré príde v jeseni a ktoré sa týka tej dnešnej témy a zvolili sme ten názov klimatická starostlivosť, takže vlastne tá téma klímy a dopadov na mesto si uvedomujeme, že súvisí s riekou, ale aj s mnohými inými vecami. No a na záver mi dovolte ešte pozvať raz pána Greža, ktorý by tiež sa rád asi rozlúčil a poďakoval, takže nech sa páči.
Ďakujem pekne, len krátko vám všetkým, že ste s nami premýšľali. Ďakujem pekne za skvelý záver, ktorý mal vedecko-poetický charakter a to ma nútilo k tomu, že som chcel povedať, že môj vzťah sa rodil pri Dunaji v Gabčíkove, keď nebola priehrada a učil som sa plávať v tých ramenách. Ráno o 5:00 sme chodili pozerať ryby a loviť ryby a že ten pocit toho Dunaja sa tam, kde si dial a pre nás v Bratislave je ten dotyk s riekou aj kúpanie v rieke niečo, čo si myslím, že väčšinou sme absolvovali, ale som rád, že aj pani námestnička to stihla, že sa ten pocit do konferencie stihla, že ten pocit, že čo to je plávať v rieke, že to je súčasťou výbavy Bratislavčov. Takže ďakujem pekne všetkým za svoj diel, ktorým prispeli do debaty. Chcem poďakovať Punktu, chcem poďakovať mojim kolegom Bratislava Tourist Board, ktorí sa venovali niekoľko mesiacov príprave, premýšľaniu o hľadaní formy, ako nevybrať a netváriť sa, že chceme byť nejakí hráči, chceme byť tí, ktorí tú tému udržia, ktorí ju budú facilitovať, ktorí spájali partnerov, ktorí by k sa mohli vyjadriť. Takže ďakujem pekne, Bratislava Tourist Board. Punkt. A chcel by som povedať, že aby tá téma žila, tak v septembri pripravujeme festival, ktorý sa dotýka rieky, mal by byť asi v polovice septembra, takže venujte pozornosť cez Punkt, cez Bratislava Tourist Board. Je to živá aktivita, v ktorej sa budeme dotýkať rieky a hľadať konkrétne aj nové projekty, ktoré by pomohli rozvinúť kultúru a našu rieku a jej benefity pre Bratislavu. Takže ďakujem pekne všetkým. Ďakujem.
Tiež ešte raz ďakujeme aj za BTB a verím, že to nie je naposledy, keď sme sa o Dunaji spoločne rozprávali. Tak pekný deň ešte a niekedy znovu pri rieke.